Here.
All right, go ahead.
Cool. Hey guys, thanks for joining me and everybody else that's on here for our monthly webinar. Hey, this month's webinar we're going to do a couple things. Hopefully it'll be interactive with those of you that want to chat about it, but I'm kind of going to make it a twofold webinar where we kind of talk about two different things. First being, there was a post that Elliot put out a couple weeks ago, and I think it's a good one that a lot of people could probably stand to discuss a little deeper, and that's why I want to talk about it here. But basically, he said, who has hired and successfly retained someone as an inside sales rep? They make calls, take calls, follow up on leads. How would you structure their pay? He knows a few of us have done it, so he was curious what our thoughts were on it. So I want to kind of go through my thoughts on that, and then if any of you guys that are thinking about hiring somebody or you have 2 cents to give on hiring an inside salesperson from your experience, love to hear about it, or just any questions that you have in regards to that. After we kind of exhaust that topic, we'll roll into hedging the market. It's something that we're obviously doing quite a bit right now, and it's a tough thing to do at times because you feel like you're leaving some opportunity on the table, but it's just something that's kind of my own personal insurance policy on how we're skinning the cat on some of these deals. So anyway, we'll roll into that strategy after that. So basically, if you got a question about either one, just I guess signal Dan or post in the chat box or whatever, and he can either unmute you or you can ask the question that way, and then we can kind of have some interaction. So more people that want to chat with me, the better, and it's not just me, jibber-jabbering the whole time. And hopefully you guys can get, as much value out of it as possible as well by having a conversation with me. So let's start with hiring people. I did this week's podcast, which will be out tomorrow, all on kind of growing the team. And, part of that obviously is going to be the fact that, you need to hire an inside person, right? That's basically part of it. So, it's an interesting thing because there's kind of two schools of thought on it, or there's two business models on it, basically. One is what we all should strive for, which is we hire somebody that's our inside salesperson. They can do a lot for us, and we can retain them for a long time so that the business grows well, and you don't have to rehire and retrain and basically rebuild the business over and over and over again. The other is that people kind of outsource that piece as much as they possibly can, and it's a revolving door, or it's an outsourced door that it works decently well, but they don't ever try and bring it in-house and make it a permanent fixture of their business in terms of the person that works for them. And it's just they're kind of like two different businesses. And so for us, obviously, we did it by bringing that person in-house. I just think it's better for company culture. I think it's better for getting deals done. I just think it's better for the company overall. But kind of, I guess, hiring that person initially can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you don't have an office space, right? Because if you're hiring an inside salesperson and you're expecting them to work at home or, virtually to do these kind of things, they can do it, but I can tell you right now, by having that inside salesperson in an office environment with us, or under the same roof, let's say, it really helps with, question answer, kind of spitballing situations, or about the property or what they told you or whatnot. That helps with training with people. It gets them, much more, I don't know, I guess their real estate IQ goes up a lot faster, which makes the business better, right? So like when Chris talks to somebody, he'll come in and talk to me, pretty much every time right after, or, a little bit later on, just about the situation, what they said. And nowadays, we've had so many of these situations, we know we can see which direction it's going. We can see which playbook we need to, utilize in order to negotiate with these people, or just kind of what they're trying to run on us as far as their own little, whether it be a scam or just their own angle or whatever. So I think having that person in-house, if at all possible, is very, very important. Now, obviously, a lot of you guys don't have office space and you don't have the ability to do that, but at some point in the future, I just think that that's the best way to go. Now, in terms of, what those inside, or how to retain those people, right? Let's talk about retaining them. And so for me, you know, I know a lot of people that have decent-sized real estate investment companies that they seem to have a constant revolving door on that inside salesperson. And the reason being is because you've got to do a fair bit of volume in order to make that a very lucrative position and not have it be a complete, ongoing liability for you in terms of additional overhead, right? The more volume you do, the less of a liability it becomes for you to deal with each month. So if you live in a market where, higher volume is much more achievable and it's not just a straight equity play market, you've got, cash flow, rental type situations, plus you got flip situations. Now you can do a higher volume, and with that higher volume, there's going to be, the hamster's got to run faster on the wheel, which means there's more for them to do, and there's more transactions going through, and if there's more transactions going through, then it's easier for you to pay them more. Now, if you're in a more equity type market where deals are fewer and farther between, there's still a lot of phone calls that have to be taken, and people have to be sifted and sorted and qualified, and appointments scheduled and follow-up calls and all that stuff. There's still quite a bit of that, but there's just not as many transactions that go through because it's a straight equity market and there's just a lot more competition, and you just have to work a little harder to find the one type of deal that market has for you, which is usually an equity play or a redevelopment play or something like that. There isn't going to be the cash flow type plays that you can get in a lower price market. So if that's the case, what I've done is, obviously we've got an hourly, which basically works out as salary, right? So you've got salary, you've got commissions. So I pay both. I pay salary and commissions. But the one thing that we did with Chris, and this is something that, a lot of you guys have had a hard time finding an agent that will do stuff for you, listing stuff for cheap and, bringing them into your operation. You're kind of weary of it, and I would be too. But if you hire that person first as an inside sales rep, and you need to find a way to, and this goes back to my point earlier, of giving them upward mobility within the company. Because if you give them continued upward mobility income-wise within the company, the chances of retaining them go up exponentially. And so that's why, for me, Chris started out as just a straight inside sales guy. And but he was an outside sales too. He, inside and outside. He'd go on appointments with me, and he went on one yesterday or the day before by himself or with Dan. So he does both. But before, now he was just a straight sales guy, right? Well, that's why I got him licensed. So he was a inside sales guy / outside sales guy first, and then I got him licensed. And by doing that, it prevents bringing somebody in that's already licensed, that has bigger income goals or bigger fish to fry and may only be with you for a little bit, or they might be trying to rape and pillage your operation or whatever. It eliminates a lot of those worries. And so I think if you can find an inside sales guy, and you can eventually, if he's the right fit, or I tend to think that, at least in my office, he's are better, but that's not to say that's the case for your office. If you can then get that person licensed down the line, it's going to help with your retention. And if it helps with your retention, it's good for the business. And that's really the bottom line. And it also, the beauty of that is, they can make more money, and that money's not costing you as the company or the business owner more money, because you're already going to be paying out money in terms of, what you're paying for your listing commissions. Unless you're doing it yourself, which some of you are, but if you're not, you can pretty much just shift that money that you're paying outside of the company and keep it within the company. And so anytime you can do that with, expenditure, you basically are vertically integrating your operation so that any money spent, or as much money as you have to spend as a company that you can keep inside the company, the better. And so that's why we did it. But basically, hiring somebody that, starts off as an inside sales rep, starts off kind of getting to know the business, getting to know how to talk to sellers, getting to know how to negotiate, getting to know the different areas of your market. You can't expect them to learn that stuff overnight. You just can't. And if you bring in somebody who's already a realtor, it's probably not going to work. So there's going to be kind of a break-in training process. It's going to take some time for them to basically get what's in your brain and put it in their brain over time. But eventually, if that person sticks, I think the best thing that you can do is get that person licensed to basically be an agent to sell your stuff as well. I just think that's a great play. And then that way, I often refer to Chris as he's like an animal that's in the zoo, right? And I say this to his face, that's why I can say it on here as well. But, he doesn't have to go outside of his cage to get fed. And he likes that, and it works out great for him, and he makes a great living doing it. But a lot of people, would very much like that arrangement. So he's kind of a caged animal. He just doesn't have to leave his cage to go eat, right? And so, we've got the inside sales role, and then we've also got the listing agent role. So that's something to think about, because I do know that there's a lot of turnover at that position. And if there's not a lot of turnover, I mean, some of the bigger operations that I know of have had a lot of turnover at that position, but some of the medium-sized and smaller operations have a hard time retaining anybody or even taking the plunge to get anybody at that position, because it's hard to maintain the volume necessary in order to, have it make sense to have that monthly liability, on your shoulders as the business owner and as the business. So something to think about. And then also, the other thing too is that you can kind of expand their roles in the beginning, before they're licensed, to kind of use as much of their bandwidth as possible. And this goes back to, having some type of a workspace that they can come to, helping with direct mail, helping with, utilities and things like that have to be transferred over or turned on and off. Just all kinds of things like that have to be done on any given transaction. You can have them help with those things as well at the beginning, to try and fill time and try and be as much of an asset to the business as they can. So that's what I would say. As far as pay structure, before they're an agent, once they're an agent, you can work out whatever it is that you end up paying them if you do decide to go that route. For us, we pay, or the listing commissions that Chris gets is 1%, and it maxes out at $6,000. So it doesn't matter how expensive the house is, it maxes out at $6,000, which obviously saves the company a lot of money in terms of what that listing commission could be. But at the same time, he's a caged animal, right? He doesn't have to leave his cage to eat, and so it works out great for him as well. But that aside, as far as pay goes, I would definitely suggest that you have an hourly type pay, before the agent thing even comes into it. I would start them out with hourly. That way, you may not need them full time right away. It may be more of like a 25 to 30 hour a week gig as you're kind of starting out and you're trying to, grow into having somebody there. And that way it gives you the ability to give them raises too, without it, being, if you start them on salary, $100, $200 raise in salary doesn't quite mean as much as $1 or $2 hourly raise, right? That somebody can get. It just means more in their mind, and it just, you want it to have as much of an impact as possible, but it gives you leeway to give them raises as things work out. But I would start them out as hourly. I would pay them, a commission per deal closed. That's for sure, whether you wholesale it, retail it, whatever you end up doing. That's how we started off with Chris is, every time we close a deal, he gets a bonus for that as well. So it's kind of hourly, depending on, whether or not there's a set number of hours somebody works in a week. It's basically salary, and then commission. So hourly and commission structure is what we have. I would suggest that, you guys think about doing it the same way. It's worked out really well for us, and, we're going on. I think he got licensed in 2012, but before that he was started here in like 2010-ish or a little before. So we're going on 7 years of, that type of structure, and it's worked out great. So that's been good for us. And like I said, then, by going hourly, I just feel like it's easier to give raises then as need be. Or if you don't want to add that, monthly liability to yourself as the business owner, you can always bump up what it is that you pay in terms of bonuses per deal that gets closed. So, and then, one thing to think about, and we used to do this, but now Chris sells the houses too, so he makes money on that side. But you might want to think about maybe bonusing part of the bonus on the front end on the buy and part of the bonus on the sell, depending on what your exit strategy is. If you're doing a quick wholesale, then you could just do one bonus. But if you do a fix and flip or some type of buy and then retail it down the line, you could do a front end bonus and a back end bonus. It just keeps the cash flow coming in on a more regular basis for people, so it's not so sporadic, and that kind of helps with company culture and just retaining people and making them feel good. So that's kind of my general breakdown in terms of, how to, or, hire somebody, how to retain somebody, and how to have them grow into the position within the company as an inside salesperson and then beyond. So if any of you guys have any questions specifically about your situation or hiring somebody or just anything about that, now would be the time that, Dan can unmute you and we can chit chat.
All right, I got a couple here.
Sweet.
Can you go over again, how do you protect yourself from them coming and stealing your ideas and then being your competition? I think you kind of touched on it based on upward mobility and, obviously providing enough incentive for them not to want to do that.
Yeah, that's a big thing. For example, I hired Chris because I knew him, and he came to me one day and he said that his wife's knocked up and he needs a job with security, so I hired him. But when we hired Dan, we were originally hiring for a marketing manager because, well, I don't need to go into it. But anyway, bottom line is we were hiring for a marketing manager because it was just too much for Chris to do all the callbacks and everything else and manage all the actual marketing. But at the time, we got a lot of applicants in. And so it's basically the same as hiring a marketing manager and inside salesperson. It's essentially you're going to get the same types of people that apply for it to some degree. But a lot of the applicants that we got in were people that said that they were interested in real estate investing, or they had sort of done it before, or they had worked for another real estate investor before, and just anything along those lines. I took those and threw them straight into the garbage. I didn't want anybody that had anything to do with real estate investing prior. That's kind of, sometimes people look at that, well, it's a positive, they kind of know, what they're doing. I would rather take somebody that's got good sales skills in terms, well, I wouldn't even say good sales skills, because they can be trained in talking to people about how to buy their house. Totally different set of sales skills than if you're selling them a car or something like that. I would say I'd look for somebody with good people skills and good phone skills. Are they comfortable on the phone? And are they good face-to-face? So if you talk to them on the phone, do a phone interview, and they're good on the phone, usually that means that they're going to be pretty good on the phone with any potential sellers. And then obviously face-to-face, how do they represent themselves? Do you have a good feeling about them? But if they had anything to do with real estate prior, I just chucked the application. I didn't want anything to do with it, because then you have to worry, and that was my number one concern. Okay, I'm going to bring this person in. Does it even matter how much upward mobility I provide them? Does it even matter, or are they the type of person that's just looking to rape and pillage and then go on to greener pastures for themselves, whatever they think that is, right? Whether it is or not is irrelevant. But are they going to be that type of person? And, generally speaking, if somebody says that they've been involved in real estate investing and this and that, they're kind of, floaters a little bit, right? And they're always looking for the magic whatever to make them $1 gazillion. And so I would rather find somebody that's just more of a straight salesperson and isn't necessarily interested in flipping houses. I mean, everybody's somewhat interested in it. Let's just, be honest, at least right now with where we're at in the market cycle, but not somebody that says that they're specifically interested in it. And so if you hire somebody that's just more of a straight salesperson and not somebody that's, tied to real estate one way or the other in their previous job or life or whatever, you have a lot less of a worry of that. Now, if you wanted to, you could do a non-compete clause. I know a couple people in the DFA have done that with people that they've hired, and it's basically, a non-compete within a certain amount of time, within a certain amount of area around where they operate. Are those really enforceable in court? Probably not, but at the same time, it at least sets the boundaries and, how people need to respect the relationship if they come to work for you. So, to avoid that, because I've never even done one, I've had to sign one when I was in the mortgage game back in the day, and they actually tried to enforce it on me because I left because the place was crazy and it didn't hold up. But to avoid even having to go down that path, I'd just rather hire somebody that had nothing to do with real estate investing or the real estate business prior, and then train them up on how to specifically talk to, sellers and whatever else, how to navigate that conversation, and just kind of get them acclimated to your system there. And if you do that, I don't think you really need to worry about it. And if you couple that with being able to provide them, upward mobility, because you're the business owner, right? People, if they say they're going to come work for you, they're coming to work for you because they think that it's a better opportunity than something else. And so as long as you keep allowing that opportunity to become better and better over time, the more time that they give you, it's not going to work out every time, but it allows you to retain people a lot easier and allows them to be happier, and it helps your company culture as well. So hopefully that answers that question.
All right, Elliot wants to be unmuted. He has a couple more questions, but I can't tell which one is which. So Elliot, just start talking and I'll see if I can find you.
Hello.
We got you.
Hello. Okay.
Wow, that was lucky.
First time.
Lucky. Well, I must be the only one on.
First time. Yeah. First time caller. I'm first time caller.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm thinking that maybe this might help other people too. So we're kind of at that point where we're on track to probably do roughly 600,000 if we keep this going. And we're kind of what my buddy calls, we're kind of in a hobby business, right? So we're running the business, but we're not really a business owners yet. We don't have any employees. We're just kind of doing it ourselves. And so that's why I had the question about hiring somebody. But now the person that I would need would be somebody that would be based in like Vancouver, so to speak, right? And that comes back to them having to be at home. But I guess the question is, how do I take it from, you know, a hobby business to hiring somebody, and what would you do? Like, what would it look like if you were in that situation to take it to that next step? Because I think hiring the first employee is probably the hardest one to hire, right?
Yeah, because that's going to be the one that you fuck up the most, just to be bluntly honest. You know, because that's where you as a business owner are going to sharpen your teeth, you know, in terms of hiring, being able to determine what's a good fit, what's a bad fit. I mean, the first person I hired was a god-awful, terrible hire back in the day looking back, but I actually kept her on for a long time, and I probably shouldn't have, but I did. But in your case, so here's what I would do, right? Because you're not going to be in Vancouver anymore. You're up in Tri-Cities. So
yeah, but I still come back a couple days a week. But I have partners that run the rehab stuff, and I'm talking to him about hiring it to try to get somebody to do more sales stuff and replicate me more over there. And the biggest concern he has is, well, you're just going to train them, and then all of a sudden we're going to fuck ourselves, and then we're just going to add one more competition, you know, to the street, even though Vancouver's kind of quiet. But so that's really what direction, I just don't know. I keep thinking, hey, I can hire somebody to go do my door knocks, my cold calls and that shit, but then if I do that, then I kind of open the whole can of worms and what I'm doing, and it's just nerve-wracking.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, there's no way to totally hedge against the possibility of somebody leaving, but here's, I guess, what I would do. I mean, if you're going to hire somebody from afar that you need to make sure doesn't take your, you know, operation and leave you at some point, you're going to have to pay them more money and almost make them feel vested to some degree. And so what that means exactly, you know, in terms of what you offer them, I don't, you know, I couldn't tell you. It's got to be your decision. But I would say that I would make them, I mean, let's not shoot for keeping them forever, right? Let's shoot for keeping them for 2 years, right? Or a year. Let's just shoot for a year to start, right? You want somebody for a year, and then at that point, you know, you can reassess. But if you do that, I would give them, you know, make them feel like they're not a decision-making partner, but some type of a small partner in terms of profits yielded, right? I mean, the pay to keep them, you know, paying their bills and their rent and all that is important. But, you know, you want them to be more focused on the common goal between, you know, which would be your goal as well, which is actual deal flow. And to do that, you got to give them a piece of the profits.
Okay.
So I think if you made it kind of, it depends on what people need, but you got to feel that out. I would definitely make it commission-based, but also make it a little commission-rich for this individual. And now you've almost got a partner, right? But they're not a decision-making partner, and they're not a majority partner in terms of the money they make. But I think if you spend a little more for the type of money that you're willing to give up to have this person, I think it'll, in the long run, it'll help your business a lot.
Now, would you do straight commission, or would you do like a salary with, or do like draws where they can do draws against a commission? Or would you, what would be a good wage for this? I mean, you kind of know the Portland, Vancouver market. I mean, that's kind of what I'm kind of, you know, I talked to a couple other guys on the East Coast, but you know, their pay structure is going to be completely different than what's acceptable in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, I would do hourly and commission. I wouldn't do draws against commission. I just don't think that model is going to work here that great for retention purposes. Because here's the thing, like the amazing salesperson that comes in and gets all these deals under contract and this and that, that will just simply take commission only on a small startup company or draws against future commission, that guy doesn't exist. That's a fairy tale for the most part. It is. So the guy that you're going to get is somebody that's coming to work for a small real estate investment company. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's just the reality of it. You know, and they're learning something that they've never done before. So that guy isn't going to be hugely successful with a ton of money in the bank, right? So they're going to need money to live off of. They're going to need some sort of, you know, constant monetary support in order to make that risk to them worth it, you know, or that new endeavor worth it, right? But at the same time, there also has to be a, you know, something that takes them over the top, and that would be the commission. So I think it's an hourly plus commission structure. How much commission, you know, that just depends on how good the person is and how much of an asset they become to the business. Could be a sliding structure commission, but they're going to require, I would start with hourly, and, you know, you can always bump that up as time goes on as well, depending on what they need. You got to find out what people's needs are as well. But, you know, you're going to balance X factor with, you know, how much you're willing to pay people, right? So.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And would you say that would be the person that I probably need? I mean, that's got to be the.
Like if I were you, I'd be looking for a partner type to operate with remotely, because you're still doing business in Tri-Cities, but obviously you've built a business in Vancouver. So, you know, look at it as almost like a franchise thing, right? You've now got your satellite franchise location going on in Vancouver while you operate in Tri-Cities. So you got to have a branch manager. You got to have a branch manager to operate that satellite franchise location.
Okay, because I basically do have a partner that I pay. I'm 50-50. So how I've structured it is I have a guy that does a ton of flips on the side, but or with that same group. But he'll actually go on my appointments, take contracts, put them in my name, run the rehab, pay for the rehab, and then I get 50-50. The issue is he's an agent, so generating new leads, and he's not really wanting to generate the leads. He'll take care of the leads once they're there to a certain extent.
Right.
But I need a better, faster way. I mean, we're still sending shit in the mail. It's just mail's dropping off a little bit, and so there's got to be other avenues. I think cold call is important. I mean, I just got off the phone with a couple of good cold calls today, and door knock. I mean, I think that's kind of. But I have basically the partner that's there that makes my life so fucking easy if I just find the deal. So I just need to find more deals.
Right. I mean, you know, you've got that 50-50 structure already in place with whatever that is, taking stuff from wholesale to retail quality, right? So,
correct.
You know, it makes it a little bit more difficult, but I think that you still need that. You need that leads branch manager, right? The marketing branch manager for Vancouver. That's what you need. And whether that, you know, in order for you guys to move forward, maybe you need to slide the scale slightly, 55-45, right, to be able to adjust, to be able to pay this person in order to continue with the lead flow so that these guys can, you know, because they're eating off this plate too, right? So, you know, I think that it's a little bit of give and take all around to be able to carve off that money to be able to hire the right guy to help you.
Thanks for your feedback.
Yeah, because I don't think you personally should pay for it all, you know, because you're spoon feeding this guy. Yeah, he's giving you 50%, but I mean, in a market like this, if you're spoon feeding him great margin deals, I mean, you know.
Yeah, he's making nickels down at the steps on the deals with those guys, and then, you know, we just hit one that we just made 120 grand and split together, and it's, you know, it's going to take him 20 deals to do that down at the steps. So he loves me. He takes that this is the coolest thing ever.
So I
want to make sure that I can utilize him more and get more deals, because it's also really good for me because I don't have to manage any projects.
Yeah.
And I don't have to put, you know, sometimes I bring money, but not all the time. And it's a good deal for everybody.
I would look at maybe carving 5% off his end and maybe another 5 to 10 off yours, and use that as the money that pays for the guy initially.
Okay, cool.
But that way your business can grow there and you can continue doing what you're doing in Tri-Cities, but you can now pay somebody that's going to be worth a shit that actually helps you long term and isn't just, you know, a constant revolving door that you're trying to fill.
Okay, thank you.
So, yep.
All right, we have some questions. Greg Lynch, the birthday boy, has one.
Oh, what are you doing on here, Greg? It's your birthday, man.
When you say paid commission on each deal closed, is that when the property is acquired, when it's a rehab/build, or paid on the back end when it sells, or both?
So we'll just go through the example. Like if it's a straight wholesale deal, I just pay it one time. You know, we buy it. I at that point approximately know what our profit take is going to be. If it's wholesale, I don't know exactly, but I know within reason. I usually just pay an upfront commission. But in the past, before Chris was licensed, I'd pay that upfront commission. But if it was a rehab or a new build, I pay the upfront commission, and then I pay a back-end commission as well once it sells, you know, based on profitability or just, you know, whatever. It's not an overly huge number, but it's just, again, you know, a bonus is a bonus is a bonus. But I break it up that way, so there was a front-end bonus and a back-end bonus. Now, Chris gets a back-end bonus, but it's basically the listing commission for selling a property.
Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Danny O had a question, but he's on a seller call right now. So David Martinez, if you are controlling the lead flow and the salesperson is just following up or door knocking, doesn't that create a barrier of entry since they need you for the leads?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's why most of those people aren't going to leave. I mean, you know, I mean, just to be honest, Chris is never going to leave, even if he did have aspirations, let's say, of more, because, you know, you as the business owner, it's your job to pay for the marketing and get the phone ringing. It's their job to take the phone calls, sift and sort the deals, and put stuff together. So, yeah, that's a big barrier of entry. A lot of people don't want that responsibility. I mean, a good salesperson doesn't mean that they're a good business owner. They're two entirely different skill sets. And most salespeople, you know, their personal lives are too much of a mess to ever be a business owner. It's just the reality of it. Or they're not wired for it. You know, they want to be able to, they're great when you got them, and then they punch out and do whatever they do. And, you know, that's just who they are. But, yeah, it's a barrier of entry. I mean, taking on the responsibility of lead flow and everything else.
I'm listening to a webinar.
Somebody's on or was on. So I hopefully that answers your question, David. But yeah, I mean, just by being the go-between in terms of lead generation, and you know, who you're hiring is just basically taking those inbound leads and trying to convert them into deals and you know, build rapport and follow up and all that. Yeah, that's a barrier of entry in itself for somebody to come in and rip off and take your model, because there's a lot more to it than just, I know how it works, now I'm going to go do it. That now I'm going to go do it comes with a lot more that most people don't ever want to take on.
Yeah, and he was saying that he said that because of Elliot's concern about creating a competitor.
Yeah, so it's a great point. Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question. But yeah, I mean, knowing how it works and actually putting your ass on the line and spending the money to do it, two entirely different things. And most people don't have the mental capabilities to withstand the stress and everything else that comes along with actually, you know, repeating it themselves. They'd rather just, you know, if they got a good gig, that's good enough, you know.
All right, so Andrew Rod is on. He called in. I'm going to have to unmute someone here to see if that's them. Andrew, start talking.
Hello?
We got
Hello?
you. We got you.
Oh, okay, cool. So sorry I was late talking to a framer. I just wanted to, I don't know if you guys covered hedging at all or anything like that, but I just wanted to flush that idea and see what everybody else's thoughts were on this.
Yeah, I mean, I got you online. We can chat about it. I mean, that was going to be part of this. So, I mean, I don't mind mixing them in. We're, you know, 37 minutes in, so we might as well get into it too. I guess before I say what I'm doing, what's your feeling right now? What are you kind of thinking in terms of hedging strategies in Denver area?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the hedging I want to do is just not really Denver specific, but it's just overall market specific. I mean, Denver as a whole, you know, it's still doing great, you know, maybe slightly more inventory depending on what price point you're at and what location, but I mean, still doesn't seem like inventory is creeping up tons of people are still moving here. So, I mean, overall, like, I'm not really worried about Denver in particular. I'm just worried about, you know, an overall credit bubble.
Right.
And so my thought was, and by the way, I'm probably the most pessimistic person you've ever met.
No, I know, that's why I'm asking. So.
yeah, and I mean, so my my parents almost got wiped out about 10 years ago or so, and had to file for BK. Well, not really that close, but they were taking some couple $1 million a year losses in their business. And so it's just, I'm always just thinking about, hey, I want to make sure this is going to keep going. I'm not going to, those personal guarantees I sign, they're not going to come due and come after me. But anyway, so my thought was, okay, let's say China gets out of hand, that bubble bursts, the world doesn't have anywhere else to grow, and somehow, you know, 20 steps later, real estate goes down 20% here in Denver. You know, still buying projects that have 20% margins. So let's just limit capital loss, if at all possible, that if anything goes down more than that, you know, in a 18-month time period, we're still protected. And so I started thinking about, okay, so oil guys, they hedge the crap out of their business. And I was talking to one private equity guy who they bought some businesses that were semi-commodity related, and they got kind of crushed on a few of them with the oil price downturn, and they were like, hey, if you can figure out a way to hedge it, and it doesn't have to be perfectly correlated, just to semi-limit your risk there, it's well worth it. And so that kind of came up with the idea of, hey, you can either, it's not going to be a perfect Denver match, but as long as I can, you know, I might buy wrong at one property, but I'm just trying to protect myself from the overall market. So my thought was either doing the Case-Shiller index on the CME or Chicago Mercantile, I guess, or do like a home builder index on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting thing. I had never even seen that, to be honest with you. And
Yep.
kind of I mean, it's a crazy idea, but you're right. I mean, there's a lot of other businesses that are much more sophisticated than ours that they hedge like crazy.
Yep.
So it's almost the norm, you know, and how they operate compared to us. But, you know, I don't know enough about it to say one way or the other, but it is an interesting idea, that's for sure. I personally, since I haven't dived into that as much as I probably could, my personal hedging is, you know, just kind of a small example. You know, we bought a property a couple weeks ago that we started work on. It's, if anybody cares to look it up, it's 7425 Southeast 64th Avenue here in Portland. And basically it's in an area that I identified as kind of the next domino to go in terms of value line being pushed across it so that new construction could start. And it has started, or it started, you know, about, I don't know, last year sometime. And now prices have risen up to about $499 is about what new construction's selling for. And everything that's being built right now is basically pending before it's done, which sounds great. But, you know, this is an area that I'm not in love with. They used to call it Felony Flats, so it's got its challenges still, even though it's gentrifying. And so we could everybody that's building this new construction, they paid $150-ish, maybe even a little bit more for the lot. So we basically paid lot value. But instead of doing new construction and making, you know, probably $30,000 to $40,000 more in potential profit, I've just decided to do a quicker turn and burn on the property. And so we'll put like 30 into it, and we'll sell it for probably like $269, $279, something like that, which is still a great return. But I guess it's just a small example of a bigger thing, which is anytime we have these properties right now at this, you know, during, you know, probably the next quarter of 2017, and we have the ability to look at it from, okay, what's the quick quicker turn and burn option versus, you know, the long term, I'm looking at both, and that's where I'm making a hedging decision right now, because I feel like, you know, in the next, we'll be done with this property in like a month, right?
Yep.
So that's virtually no real change is going to happen in Portland in the next month, with the exception of maybe, you know, slightly more demand as the front end of the summer selling season. What next summer selling season looks like, I don't know. But right now, you know, I know it's going to be a degree of hot, right? So, so that's my personal hedge. You know, we're fortunate enough that we've got enough of bigger projects dirt-wise that we bought a while ago that now we're building out. But if we didn't, you know, I would be probably careful about getting into more partition type stuff unless I got a great deal on the dirt, which is harder to do right now because everybody thinks everything's worth, you know, its weight in gold. Because that timeline then pushes out to at least, you know, 18 months probably to get the build totally done from start to finish. And I don't want to be there. So I would probably do a lot more one down, one up situations if we didn't have that dirt that we already bought. And then in addition to kind of the hedge strategy we're doing right now, which is, okay, if we can turn it as a smaller house rehab and not, you know, knock it down and build it new, you know, maybe we do that as well. So, and then we did one last week that we sold as a wholesale that, you know, we paid $150 for it as well. You know, that's an area that probably is $525 for new construction as opposed to $499, but we just wholesaleed that one out and sold it for just a little under 200 grand. And that was, you know, we could have made more money, and I think that we probably could have sold that new construction easier because it's in a little better part of Felony Flats. It's closer to a nicer area. But even so, you know, I left some money on the table to hedge that one as well. So.
Okay. So basically, just reducing the time frame. So are you not really, unless it's an amazing deal, you're just kind of saying, I'm going to take a pause on acquisitions of new builds?
Basically, I mean, yes, but that's because we also have a backlog of dirt that we need to build out. So that dirt was bought at, you know, 2015 prices, essentially. So, you know, that if we build those out, you know, kind of like that when I did that interview with Artem a couple weeks ago, you know, I was curious what he thought because they got way more money on the table than I do, and they're going multi, which is even a more suspect market in my opinion. But they look at it from the perspective of, okay, they'll lose sweat equity, but they don't want to lose real equity. So, you know, that would be kind of how I look at the new build game if I was buying it closer to now prices. You know, I would be careful, you know, even if we were buying more new build dirt right now, I would be careful not to be chasing it up and setting the new high water mark for what somebody paid for a teardown somewhere, for sure. But, you know, even so, if I could get a decent deal on it, I would still buy it if I could just go quickly and just do one down, one ups. I would do that still for sure. But again, right area too. I mean, you know, you've got those areas, you know, your area as well as I know mine. You know, if it's kind of one of those most recent dominoes to fall in terms of gentrification, I'm a little more suspect to those areas than the long-term ones, you know, that have been great for a longer period of time. So.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So hopefully that. Cool.
I appreciate your thoughts, Tucker.
Yeah. You got some interesting ideas with that hedging, though. you got my wheels turning on that. That's for sure. So.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, Dan. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, Danny O. Go ahead, Danny.
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, what's happening, Danny?
So I had to tune out a couple of times on that call, so I apologize if you talked about it.
No problem.
But you kind of started it with Elliot over, you know, how much to pay and then, you know, to bonus them out as well. What did you have an idea of the percentage on the bonus?
I never really percentaged it, to be honest. You know, I usually the front end bonus would be somewhere between $500 and $1,000, because I never wanted to make it a percentage of actual profits if you're paying a decent hourly on top of it, right? Because then I think you're extracting more money from the business than you need to that could go to continued marketing expense and things like that. So it's a delicate balance, but you know, I think if you're paying jack crap for, you know, hourly, then yeah, maybe you want to tie it to a percentage of that, but otherwise I don't think you have to. But, you know, in your market, you know, it just depends on price points are a little bit lower. So maybe, you know, if $5,000 might be 10%, right? In terms of, you know, a quick flip or even, you know, a longer term, you know, wholesale deal. So I don't know, I paid usually between 500 and 1,000 per bonus, front end, back end, and then an hourly rate, which, you know, when Chris started, he started at $15 an hour. He's obviously higher than that now, by a fair bit, but that's where I started him to kind of, as he kind of, you know, ground his teeth in talking to sellers.
How much did you say?
15 an hour.
Okay.
Now, I'm sure people could be hired for less, and people hire VAs for substantially less to do it, but, you know, I knew he was a good salesperson, and so that was about the threshold to make sure that he was, you know, happy starting out, and, you know, obviously I've given him a number of raises since then as well. So.
Okay, that gives me great perspective, because then I can think about, because I was also thinking about it, how much does somebody starting out, would you want them to earn with bonus and hourly? And then I know you talked about, like, you know, you don't want to hire somebody that is an investor or wants to be an investor. I think a lot about, you know, maybe somebody who's a realtor, who already is a realtor, who's maybe working with, like, those brokers that don't take out commission, kind of a scenario. What do you think about that?
You mean like somebody that works on a team?
No, not specifically. Just a real, like, I have a brokerage here who they don't take out any commissions. They don't provide anything. That you just get to hang your license there and pay a monthly fee.
Okay.
So, like, I could pull from that or recruit from that and see if, you know, if there's somebody skillful enough, maybe young enough, I don't know, that would be a good fit.
I mean, it's possible. They're going to have to be younger, right, and hungry and not have a book of business of their own yet, but yet be solid enough that they're reliable. So with realtors, that's kind of a hard mix sometimes, you know, if they're a realtor first. Not saying that guy doesn't exist, but, you know, it's usually people become realtors because they want to be self-employed and have time freedom and, you know, chase big checks and things like that, right? So sometimes it's hard to find the guy that you need that's kind of grinding it out on the phones, you know, working for hourly plus bonus, when the pool that you're fishing in to find that guy, you know, the reason why they became a realtor is a little different than that. So maybe you find the guy he had his, you know, he was idealistic about what being a realtor was going to be, and now he's come down to earth as far as what it really is, and that sounds good to him, right, to come do that with you. That would be the guy you probably need to find.
Would you say, like, because I know Chris said when he first started making seller calls, he would just, you know, kind of stare at the phone and not know what to say.
Yeah.
He was kind of like that when he started out as a realtor? Or was he more kind of prepared for that?
No, he wasn't. I mean, he was more prepared because basically working as my number two gave him more confidence to, you know, have opinions certain ways and to, you know, tell people how it is and things like that, because he heard me tell him so many times, you know. But it took some time for him to kind of catch his stride with that as well. But he didn't do a bad job. Now he's kind of grown into himself, just like with any position. But I would say it was definitely harder for him to find his stride talking to sellers than it was talking to the realtors.
Okay, for sure. And then lastly, like, this part of the business, I completely overanalyze. Everything else I just kind of could always just jump in and do. And so I think at first it was like, you know, I make so much money with so little headache and management, but a lot of what you say resonates. You know, I have a lot bigger aspirations. I want to do more, and it's like, if I'm not working, you know, what else would I be doing? I actually enjoy doing this. And so I'm kind of more on the other side of now, maybe I should start doing that. But then I started thinking about, well, you know, you don't know where the economy is going to go next year. You don't know where that kind of stuff's going to be. I mean, what do you think about that?
It's interesting. I just recorded this week's show kind of all about that. You know, it depends. You know, it really depends on you personally and what you really want to, you know, what you really want to accomplish. I think in the next 12 to 24 months, the market's going to soften inevitably. It's going to happen. But I think the people that are going to be most at risk are those that are kind of one-trick ponies, right? Strictly wholesale guys. Because the problem is when the market softens, nobody wants to pay a wholesaler a lot of money for a property because they feel like they're taking all the risk, and the wholesale market pretty much goes away. People aren't looking for stuff that needs to be fixed up and paying top dollar for it on RMLS. They just want turnkey. That's all that gets bought for the most part, at least with any sort of margin for you. So I think that you're set up now to be not, I mean, you're obviously not a one-trick pony, so, but you're set up to be able to continue to make money even if the market's off. I mean, we did great in 2009. I mean, we sold a ton of houses. We made a ton of money. And the market, you know, in a lot of people's eyes was shit. So, but the reason why is because we weren't wholesaling anything. We were taking, you know, more entry-level housing, and we were making it, you know, clean and turnkey, and we were selling it to retail buyers. So okay. I think that market will always be there. You know, everything sells at a price, but to be able to provide that type of product, that's how you can kind of insulate your business. And you're already there, but it's just a matter of, you know, what you want out of the business as well. How much risk you want to take on, how much additional, you know, responsibility you want to take on. You know, those are personal choices too that you got to decide on.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. What do we got, Dan? I see.
So Greg wants to know, do you bonus Jerry on deals? If so, how is that structured?
Yeah, so obviously, you know, Greg's got a pretty robust construction side of the business as well, so this would apply. I've been talking more about office people, but so Jerry is set up hourly. You know, I was thinking about doing salary, but hourly just works out better because I can continue to give him raises, and it just, you know, again, I feel like that's just if you're going hourly, it's easier to give raises. I think the raises mean more, but I do bonus him as well. So every time we sell a project, he gets a bonus, and he was probably last year 60-40, 60% of his income was bonus income, 40% was hourly. So I bonus him really well on those. But I do that for a reason, because I want him to feel vested in the quality of product that we're putting out. And I think by making it his pay slightly bonus heavy over hourly at the end of any given year, I think that helps, you know, with that. So that's how I have him set up.
Okay, and then I kind of already answered this. Joey was curious why you recommend males over females, and I just said because the women probably couldn't handle the office banter amongst all us males.
Yeah, I mean, it's a personal choice, and it's not anything sexist or anything like that. I'm just a realist in terms of I know what our office environment is, and I know what it isn't. And it is male-friendly, and it would have to be. We had a gal that worked when the real estate company that we hang our license with, or that lets us net branch, when they shared office space with us here, they had a Mexican gal that was up front, Maria. She's a hoot, man. But she was, like, very, very type A, and, like, if she didn't like what you said, she let you have it. But she was also very thick-skinned, so she worked. But it would have to be a personality like that. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't work every day. And so for that reason, I just try and keep it male.
Greg had a follow-up. Is the bonus contingent on anything, i.e. timeline, budget, etc.?
No, because I have him, you know, Joni works directly with him in terms of budgeting. So her job becomes, you know, basically deciding on all of the stuff that we're going to put in the house, which obviously affects budget. Timeline, I don't tie it to that at this point because he's been with us for going on, you know, almost 7 years. So he knows what we expect, and, you know, he generally meets that. And if he doesn't, then he hears about it. So he's, you know, he's one of those guys that doesn't need to be micromanaged. But, you know, maybe starting out, whoever you hire would have to really understand scheduling, or you'd have to go over the schedule with them and they'd have to hold to it. But there's so many factors in construction, as you know, that, you know, push schedules out, or guys, you know, whatever reason you don't pass inspection, or just all kinds of things that make scheduling tough. So I haven't made that a part of it, but he also is very clear on what the expectations are. I mean, in terms of, you know, not having dead days. I mean, he's actually one that, you know, Joni schedules, when she does the scheduling, she schedules more dead days in between subs by quite a bit than he does. He's very bam, 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 which sometimes is good, sometimes is bad, right? Because if one guy screws the pooch, you don't pass inspection or whatever, or there's issues, then you have to reschedule everybody else down the line. So, I guess to answer your question, no, I don't tie it to timelines, but you know, he knows there's clear communication as far as what's expected.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Okay. Well, we're coming up at the hour mark, so we should be. I think we covered pretty heavily on the hiring, which I think is important, and a little bit on the hedging, which obviously I think is important as well. But I wanted this to be majority on hiring anyway. So if nobody else has any other questions, I think we can probably put a bow on this one, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, and if anybody has anything else, just post in the Facebook group, and we'll get back to you.
Cool. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. Good questions. Glad I was able to talk to all you guys that want to chat and post questions. But if you have any others, put them in the Facebook group like Dan said, and we'll get back to you.